Imagine a world where more women have the time to fully explore their genius. Welcome to She Rebel Radio, the UK's podcast for women leaders and founders ready to unlearn conventional rules and lead their businesses of significance. Hailed for counter-status quo ideas and a whole dose of feminine perspective, this is our International Women's Day series, sponsored by our headline partners, NatWest. My name's Lulu Minns. I host retreats and create spaces for women leaders to explore their genius. And today, I'm going to create that same space right here for you on this podcast. Welcome to episode 112 of She Rebel Radio, Embrace Millions with Kimberley Abbott. Kim is the CEO and founder of Vested, a sustainability and impact data company with a mission to redefine millionaire to be a person who impacts millions of lives rather than making millions of pounds. Their unique algorithm enables investors to make decisions on where to invest their money based not on financial impact, but where they can make the best impact on society. The mantra of Vested is that money doesn't change the world, but the people who spend it do. Last year, Kim was featured in Harper's Bazaar magazine and, of course, nominated for the 100 Female Entrepreneurs to Watch list with NatWest and the Telegraph. Kim, it's amazing to have you here. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, and it's nice to be here talking to you today.
Yes, and the sun is shining, and I hear you're from Australia originally, so lover of the sunshine and the sea.
I am. I'm Australian born and bred, but have lived here in the UK for 7 years now. So it's been a while, but I do enjoy when it's sunny here for sure.
Yes, yeah, it makes such a difference. It really does. Now, Kim, the problem you're solving is a huge one. Why do we need to redefine the word millionaire? And how did making a million lives better become your mission?
Yeah, I decided to tackle one of the biggest problems I thought that existed. But the reason on why do we need to redefine it is, quite simply, the world is short about $5 trillion every year of enough money to even come close to solving the world's biggest issues. And by that, I mean climate change, poverty, inequalities. And that $5 trillion is, even if we upped government aid, even if we upped philanthropy, we are still $3 to $5 trillion short.
Wow.
So the only place in the world really that kind of money exists is in the capital markets. But the reality was, unless we redefine and come up with a new definition of value of companies, of our investments, then we're not going to kind of change or close that financing gap. So the challenge for me then was kind of, how do we measure and quantify the value of the social and the environmental impact in a way that's as easy as the bottom line on the balance sheet of a company, so that we can put impact up alongside risk and return. And we can basically, have a whole new definition of value, which to me would completely change how we allocate money, and hopefully enable us to then solve the world's biggest problems.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And this is maybe a really random question, but I don't know if you do. How long have we been using the word millionaire, in terms of the human existence, and quantifying that around money, basically, and how much someone is worth financially? I don't know how long that has been a word that's kind of been in the business kind of government world in any event.
I don't know either, to be honest. And there's a lot of good research even on, since when did we define that money, that revenue was the most significant point of value. There's a lot of research even around how we calculate GDP. The success of a country is calculated on its gross domestic product, which is calculated only on what we can measure the value of, which means things like women's care, doesn't get counted. And I think that kind of goes back to the fundamental of millionaire, is since when did we define and decide that the biggest value was the monetary one, not the one we can have on people or society?
Yeah, and interesting, I think your business in any way is perfectly timed, but also, with the value of money going down, the value of millionaire in a financial way going down, why not redefine it? It's the perfect time.
Think too, we live in a world right now where, frankly, I think we care more than we ever have. And it was a personal thing also for me, was that, I'd rather see in my bank account, yes, it would be nice to see that my pension has made me, X amount of return, but I'd love to also see that I've helped X hundred of thousands or X million people. And I think, like you say, our values maybe are shifting, and the reality that we can count and measure this stuff now. It enables us to actually make this change now if we want to.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you started your academic career as a mechanical engineer and have already won numerous awards in Australia, as a young person, as a woman, all of those things. And you started a social enterprise supporting women in India with economic empowerment as your first kind of business. I think you really bring together something special in terms of how can we bring more heart and humility into algorithms, data, and science?
Yeah, the first thing about why we even need, I think, more humility and heart into it. I think it's needed because if we bring that in, we will start to solve the right problems. There's a lot of buzz at the moment around things like Chat GPT, and I think it's an incredible piece of technology. But the value comes when we're solving the problems that actually matter with it. And that to me comes, from that kind of humility of understanding where something can deliver the most value. I think we need to be realistic as well about where tech should be involved and where it shouldn't. And I think that does keep the humanity into it. At Vested, we do use AI, we use tech like that, which helps us to simplify the complexity of the information, but we refuse to let it make a decision, because to us, it's a human that can actually truly make the best place decision about what is most needed for a certain society or for themselves. But I think that the how do we bring more heart and humility comes a lot about, we basically need more diversity. Someone said if we brought more, of that humanity to engineering, we would have more women and girls there. And I think that's a big grand statement on, that girls care more, because I don't think that's entirely true. Mm-hmm. But I do think we connect better with the things that resonate with us. And by doing that, we will attract more diversity. But by having more diversity is how we keep the humanity in the tech, because it's people's learned experiences that they step up and go, hang on a minute, I think this could, either help here or it could harm here. And I'm really conscious of making sure we do a lot with data from developing markets and developing nations, and making sure that their voices are involved, because they have the lived experience of these problems that we'd like to solve. And I think that's what keeps tech honest, is people, and having a diversity of experiences, and diversity of insight and knowledge.
Yeah, and I think what's really important, the distinction you made there in terms of where to use tech and where not to, and allowing humans to make the decisions, the informed decisions on the data, but not allowing tech to make the decisions itself, is a really, really powerful and important point. Now, at Vested, you measure what matters. And I said to you before we hit record, I think your mission is so, simple and clear for people that may be intimidated by AI or not consider themselves as a tech person. And I include myself in that. Now, what 4 things, I think it'd be really interesting to hear, does your algorithm measure apart from financial impact?
Yeah, so in terms of when we say measure what matters, I'll give a kind of one sentence first on why that's important, because currently in the financial markets, we hear a lot about ESG, the words ESG and sustainable investing, which is environmental, social, and governance. Mm-hmm. And it's a risk-based approach that basically looks at what is the impact of the environment, of climate change, on the performance of a company. Now, what I decided and what we believe matters is the opposite, actually. What is the impact of the company, what they do and what they deliver outside on the issues that matter to society? So that's the fundamental thing when we say we're measuring what matters. We're measuring the outward material impact of a company. And we measure the positive impacts, we measure the negatives, and we measure the indirect. But the 4 things that we're actually basing the principles of is, how do you decide, basically, how much impact, a telecommunications company has on, access to basic services or access to internet. We look at it across 4 pillars, which actually didn't just come up from our brains. We took the best practice from people that have doing this for decades in the development world and people like the Impact Management Project. But we measure it across, are they helping the right people? So people is the first one. Are you serving the people that are most in need in terms of what you're delivering? If you're delivering affordable housing, is it serving the right people in the right places? That affects your impact. Mm-hmm. The second thing is, how important is the problem you're solving? Not just globally, like climate change, but locally to the people. I think in London at the moment, it's cost of living and affordable housing is one of the most important things. The third one is the value. How much value does the company and their products and services actually move the needle? And the last one is, what is the overall effect and change that they actually generate? And they're the 4 pillars under that huge amount of detail and data, but fundamentally it's asking those questions of companies, not who ticks the right boxes, and does the nice flashy marketing.
Yeah, amazing. And as you have said, that real starting point, you're flipping on its head of what's the outward impact of a company rather than the other way around, which is really powerful. Now, you're an advisor for the United Nations and recently attended the Peace Forum. How is that supporting you at Vested to impact millions of lives?
So my background, I was a mechanical engineer and I did a few things. Then I actually worked for the United Nations for 4 years in peacekeeping, designing and building the platform that they use to assess and monitor the performance of global peacekeeping. And I think it's really critical because the development world has for decades had to and learned how to measure the impact of what they spend their money on. So for me, it was actually that experience and working with those experts and in that world basically taught me that we can take what they have done great for decades and apply it to a sector that really, and not for any fault of their own, don't know how to do this. So I think it's absolutely critical to ensure we have best practice, because we're talking about human lives here. Development, organizations and that kind of world has worked in that space for decades, but we're now talking about combining the huge financial power that exists in the capital markets across. So for me, it's utterly important. But I think the second thing, which is relevant to things like the Peace Forum, the Paris Peace Forum, most people haven't heard of it, but it is like COP is for climate, the World Economic Forum is for global economy, and the Peace Forum is quite literally the Global Forum for Peace. So heads of state from all over the world come in, and we were asked to present as one of 4 solutions on solving measuring the non-financial impact of companies. And to me, that's actually so important, because if we are going to change things in the world, we need to deal with the levers of power. And whether we like it or not, the levers of power sit with these big institutions and these big organizations. So sometimes I feel like I'm dancing with the devil a little bit, but actually one of my advisors, says to me all the time that, you have to be in the room to change things. So they're huge for us in terms of driving this change, but doing it as a collective. We're one small company. We actually need everyone to make this change. It's not just us.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And is it true to say that those rooms are still more male dominated?
I would say yes. Yeah, I don't think it's untrue to say, particularly at the highest leadership levels. In the financial sector, absolutely. And in the development sector, I think in general, it's not just gender diversity that's needed, it's the global south. There is not enough diversity at the table in terms of people from developing nations and things like that. So I do think there's a lot to be done. And I think bringing in the small, agile, innovative thinkers to the people that have done this, for decades and for good reason, have good risk aversion. And I think you need to bring them together, not one versus the other.
Yeah. Amazing. That world, I was saying to a previous guest, actually, agility keeps coming up as being really important factor for 2023 and, where things are heading. And on that note, Why should we be ditching the idea of business as usual to business as it should be? That's another one of your mantras. And what are some of the biggest challenges we face here?
The why we should be ditching it is quite simply because it's good business. I don't think, I need to spout the statistics or the data that quite simply says, it is better for business now to start to solve these problems, to be better companies, whether that is paying your staff properly or having sustainable products. So I think first and foremost, it just makes business sense. Mm-hmm. I think secondly, we don't really have a choice these days with the amount of regulation that's coming into play, particularly in Europe. You don't have a choice really of business as usual. Particularly if you're a large company, you're being required now to disclose your negative impacts, to report. So I think that's the two reasons. I think the challenges, though, being realistic, the challenges we face in that making this something that is just business as usual. I think there is a tech challenge in that in some industries, whilst we would like to make them carbon neutral and carbon zero, the tech may not exist yet. And that's fair. And we have to be fair of those industries that need time to transition because the tech needs to catch up. I think the second challenge is there is still a lack of understanding about impact and how it's interconnected. It's one thing to say you have a phone that gives people access to affordable mobile services and that, but you do also have to understand the interconnected, be it negative or positives, and that's a lot. So I think there's a lot to do there. But I think the final thing is the other challenge is I wouldn't say it's a lack of will. I think genuinely we do live in a generation that cares more than ever. But we need to incentivize that. And I think tying incentive to making these changes is just probably the challenge we have. I see leadership in big banks, they care. They genuinely care as humans, but they've not got an incentive to act and make a decision on it. So I think that's the third challenge that I put mainly to the bigger corporations. But if you're small, I think you can walk the talk too in tying incentive to, genuinely making good business decisions for the world.
Yeah, amazing. And do you think, the financial pressure that is there, as we've said, particularly in London, in the UK at the moment, and many places around the world, is going to create another hurdle for not only consumers to act in a more sustainable way, but also companies to produce in a way that, is taking into account all of these other factors?
Yes, and I do think we have to be understanding and realistic of that, but also impact isn't one dimensional. And I often say that to people, economy and jobs is an area of the Sustainable Development Goals. So even if you're an oil and gas company, yes, they have a huge amount of negatives, but they do, let's be honest, create jobs and help the economy. And I think what we're basically saying, and particularly invested, we show both sides because sometimes there truly is a trade-off. And that is okay. I think given these economic times, that may be the trade-off. But all I would say is do what you can. You do what you can, to the capacity that you can. Some people can afford to make huge changes. Some businesses can't. I think as long as businesses are doing what they can with what they have, that's all we can reasonably expect, particularly in the economic times we have, as you mentioned.
Absolutely. Now, congratulations for being selected for the top 100 female entrepreneurs to watch list with NatWest and the Telegraph. How did that feel, and what additional support for the business are you looking forward to receiving?
It's always kind of mind-blowing, I think, to be recognized in these kind of lists, and particularly when I encourage anyone to go and look at the full list of 100 entrepreneurs, because there's some truly incredible women. And I think, particularly at the moment, there's a lot of news about the funding gap in that women-owned companies only receive about 2% of VC funding. And anyone who says there's a pipeline problem if there aren't enough phenomenal female founders only need to look at this list. So I think it's quite humbling to be included in that. And also it's exciting to see the talent and the variation in businesses. We're not just talking tech startups, you're talking there's graphic design, there's consultancies, and I think it's a wonderful representation of the diversity of types of businesses that females found, which, newsflash, is any type of business. But yeah, I just think I'm excited to get to know some of these other female entrepreneurs. I think there's phenomenal opportunities for us to collaborate. Women tend to do that better than anyone. So I think there's no doubt that there will be a lot of networking, mentoring, collaborating together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I keep going back to the list, obviously, from, creating the series of She Rebel Radio and, finding another point of interest in terms of another business and another woman, doing something that's amazing. And you're quite right in terms of the categories, that there are, there's product-based businesses and consultancy businesses and tech businesses and, all sorts of amazing businesses and lots of diversity. Now, this is the Embracing Equity series, or, International Women's Day. The theme is embracing equity. So we're really tying that into She Rebel Radio for this series. How can we as women leaders embrace millions and focus ourselves on chasing purpose and not money? Because I think what's really interesting about what you do as well is, finances, and we've touched on it a little bit, and money holds us hostage as individuals as much as it does big companies and, in the wider collective. So what are your top tips to really embrace millions and chase the impact and purpose that we can make as individuals and small companies on others?
My top tips, and you can take these on a personal level if you're listening, or if you have a business, either or. I'd say the first is decide what it is you care about. We all have different things, I think, that we value and we care about, and that's okay. And I actually think that's needed, that, we all have these unique things. But I think it's necessary because it is exceptionally daunting in the world at the moment to see all the different challenges that are faced. And if you try to solve them all, it's a recipe for burying yourself in disaster. So I would say decide what it is you care about first and foremost. What is it, either as a company or as an individual, that you think you do really care about? The second thing I would say is ask questions about it. So if it is financial, say for example you have your pension or maybe your investments, start asking your bank or that the questions about, well, what is the impact of my money, and is it helping to serve these things I care about? They have a duty, a fiduciary duty, to make sure they take your values into account. So ask those questions. Start asking questions maybe of your business even, and is it truly serving what you care about or not? It might mean, pivoting a few things, but I think it's worth asking yourself that. And then the third one, which I've already mentioned, is you will end up with usually a huge list or a huge bunch of things, but simply do what you can. Mm-hmm. And I think this is key. Even myself, it's a huge risk. I left to chase purpose and start a company, which is a huge financial risk. Not everyone can make those risks. So I'm not going to tell everyone to run out and start a business that's chasing what you love, because you might not be able to. So simply doing what it is you can. If it's tackling one small thing of going, I'm gonna send my bank this email, or I'm going to, make sure, we put a post out or an article, emphasizing this thing we care about. Something is better than nothing, is kind of our motto as well. So that's my three things. Decide what you care about, ask questions about it, and then do what you can.
Yeah, amazing. And I think it's really powerful in terms of just even making that shift to asking the right questions. The power is not always in the answer. It's starting to ask a different question, which can lead us to, different action, etc. What 3 things are you personally going to be embracing this year?
On a personal level, I'm embracing more running and fitness. I'm trying to embrace a lot more of the mental health side and taking care of yourself as a founder, but also as a human. I think the last few years has been tough on everyone. So on a personal level, I'm trying to prioritize that. And on a business level, I'm actually trying to embrace this year. I'm trying to embrace the imposter syndrome, which many women will understand, which is, I look at, when I talked about the funding gap earlier, I look at male founded companies with 10 times the money and 1/10 of the ability. And I think, I'm not the imposter. they are. So I'm trying to embrace that this year and kind of have that confidence and go, we deserve to be in the room. You're not the imposter, and everyone in this world is generally just figuring it out. So go with it.
Yeah, nicely said. And yes, those rooms of other empowered women, and as you say, with the 100 female entrepreneurs each other, can really support us in moving forward with that, and with the work that we're doing. What is next for you, and where can we find you at Vested?
What is next for us? We have a big year this year, but really we're just trying to continue our mission to get more people, using our data to help them make decisions about where their investments and their money can make the biggest impact. So where you can find us, both if you're interested in, if you run an impact fund, you want to know the impact of your company, the best place to find us is at our website at www.vestedimpact.co.uk. Or you can look me up on LinkedIn. Always happy to chat to anybody really who's on this mission with us and who cares about, helping to solve some of the world's greatest problems.
Amazing, Kim. We will put the link to your website in the show notes. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your mission with us on She Rebel Radio.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
You've been listening to She Rebel Radio. We thank you for listening and thank our headline partners NatWest for sponsoring this series. If this episode has inspired you, please pass it on and share with at least one other incredible woman, and don't forget to hit subscribe and leave us a review. You can find out more about me and my work at luluminns.com or on most social media platforms.